Interested in the shoe you held up.
Yeah, there's a few of them. So it was I went down to Metagene, Colombia in 2018.
Try to hold it still because you're kind of it blurs. Oh yeah, that's good. Oh, that's good. Go ahead. Wow. I'm sorry. Oh wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So I'm gonna launch into this. I'll try to keep it at like 2-3 minutes, but it's a little bit hard. So I went down to Metagene, Colombia. I love to travel in 2018. I had traveled a lot of South America from Patagonia to the Galapagos, but had to jump back to the States and didn't get to Colombia. So I'm supposed to come to California for work meetings in healthcare innovation. And 2 of the 3 meetings canceled. I'm like, I'm not flying to California for one face-to-face. So I had this gap on my calendar for 5 days, and that never happens. And so the girl I was involved with, her and I were kind of on the fritz. I'm like, hey, let's go travel like we used to. Let's see if we can figure this out. Let's go to Colombia, same time zone, 6 hours. We're there. I had just seen Narcos as well. And then I came across, have you seen Narcos on Netflix, the show? Phenomenal show, the history of kind of the cartel and cocaine in the 80s and Pablo Escobar, done really well. Very violent portrayal of Colombia and the murder capital of the world, Medellin especially. And so I was intrigued because I had read this article that Medellin had won the most innovative city in the world. I'm like, BS, like that's some PR tourist thing. I started looking into it, and I started looking at the innovation ingenuity they started using in the poorest neighborhoods. For example, they used ski lifts to transport people from mountain to mountain. It's in a mountainous region, 7,000 feet in the Andes rainforest. They put 6 outdoor escalators in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods, connecting 3 mountains and taking the climbing commute from an hour and a half to 6 minutes.
Wow.
They spent $4 million on these escalators and changed the livelihoods of like 75,000 people in this barrio. So I'm like, let's go. So I go down to Medellin, Colombia. I've been to South America, a lot of times. And I get to Medellin, and I'm there about 3 hours, and I'm taking pictures on this brand new Samsung phone that I got, put it in my front pocket. 2 minutes later, it's stolen right out of my front pocket in the city square. And I'm just like, and I played it back in my head, and I saw a coordinated effort, and I actually started clapping. It was such a great lift, Jayson. I'd never, I've been to so many different cities and nothing has ever been stolen, but this was like brilliant, right? So I'm
in the front pocket, no less, not the back or a book bag.
Broad daylight. I mean, bump from behind. I'm saying lo siento, sorry to the person in front of me. Someone from behind comes in. I mean, I take 10 steps and it's like, they're gone.
Wow.
So I'm like, welcome to Medellin. I'm like, this is interesting. But there was a neighborhood that I wanted to go to called Comuna 13. And I'm going to hold this picture up and hopefully you get it. You can kind of see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this neighborhood was part of the Medellin cartel. It was the most dangerous neighborhood on the planet. All trafficking had gone through there. There had been rebel forces, insurgents, and guerrillas, paramilitary troops in there. And the government was battling for this region. So this region had been transformed. And I wanted to go visit it. There's 225 murals. There's artists, musicians, and vendors and stuff. So I'm like, okay, it's my birthday. So I book a tour. I'm looking to book a tour on my birthday because that's one of the days that we're there. And I hate commercial tours. I have taken a lot of tours. And one example, in Berlin, there was a Scotsman who had been there 3 months that gave me a tour of Berlin. Like, that's just absurd to me. Like, if you're going to give me a tour, I want you to be a local. I want you to know what's going on. So I'm perusing the internet and Google Comuna 13 tours, all like TripAdvisor, Expedia, all these commercial big bus tours. And I go to like page 4 of Google, and there's this site that says Stairway Storytellers Locals. And I click on it, and it says, Jayson, broken website that's barely loading. I'm on my tablet, so my phone's still. And it's like locals giving tours about local history. And I was like, okay, cool. So I borrow my ex's phone and WhatsApp this guy. And he's like, yes, my name's Steven. I can give you a tour. Meet me at San Javier Metro Station at 2 p.m. tomorrow. And it was what drew me to it was it said free walking tour. If you're happy with it, you can pay us at the end. So I was like, that's kind of interesting. Like, like he's looking for tips and he's not charging tickets. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I'll see you at 2 p.m. And I look at the metro station, and it's like the most dangerous metro station in this city. And I'm like, okay, but I asked the concierge, He's like, if you go in the afternoon, it's totally fine. There's people that go for tours. You should be fine. Don't worry about it. So I go.
They're all in on it.
I'm sorry?
They're all in on it. Even the guy that said it's fine.
I'm thinking, like, there's a hotel that speaks Spanish, right? English. Like Colombia is not. This is 2 years after they sign a peace. They've been under civil war for 60 years. It's 2 years after they have peace. So there's one guy at the hotel who's like, yeah, go ahead. I'm like, it's daylight. We'll figure it out. So we get there and I see, he tells me he's going to have his green shirt on. I walk up to the guy, it says Steven. He's got a ponytail down to his ass, tats and piercings. I'm like, this is going to suck so bad. Like, I'm just like total judging book by cover. And he launches in and he starts speaking English and it's fast. And I'm like, wow, I'm impressed. He must be a college student. And he's taking me around and there's 6 other people on the tour. I don't know them. And we're walking for a little bit. He's giving the history of the neighborhood. And I'm thinking, one thing I love is that he's not talking about the violence. He's talking about the Renaissance. He's talking about the flourishing and the blossoming of all the stuff that's happening coming from it. But he's not spending any time on like dark tourism or narco tourism. So we get up to this area here. I see this color and this music. And I'm like, Rena, how come I've never heard of this place before? It's just infectious. And I break away from the crowd a little bit. I'm always kind of within eyeshot of it. And I'm looking at the vendors and the art, and I'm looking at T-shirts and all this other stuff. And I come back to him about 30 minutes later, and I don't want to interrupt him because, he's going through his story. And my ex is like, okay, we have to go to dinner now. And I'm like, because it's my birthday and she had booked a place. So I had to leave about 30 minutes early. So I'm like, hey, listen, I gave him 50,000 pesos. I'm like, this was great. I'm sorry we have to leave, but this was incredible. And I get on one of the escalators that's in this neighborhood. And I take 2 of them down and something's pulling like in my head. I'm like, you know what? There's something magical about this place. And so I ran back up and I was like, hey, and he turns around, Steven, and I look at him and I'm like, come here for a second. And he thought I gave him too much money. Now that I know him, he's like, I thought you wanted your money back. And I look at him, I'm like, hey, you grew up here? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, when did you learn English? Because no one in the country was speaking English at the time. He's like, about 18 months ago, I saw tourists and gringos coming. So I got a notebook and I started watching English cartoons and I taught myself enough English to take an exam so I could enroll in English classes. I go, what are you doing later? I'm in innovation. I'm not gay. You need to come to my hotel so we can hang out. And so my hotel and I just want to do this.
That's the best pitch. Yeah. What are you doing later? I'm not gay. I'm an innovator.
I'm flamboyant, like just in his face, excited, right? Like, and I'm like, come to my hotel, like whatever. Like, and Colombia like has a lot of tourists that come for partying and prostitutions and drugs and stuff. And I just was like, anyway, this is Steven and his family now, but he showed up at the hotel the next day. We started talking. He brought an artist friend who's done these shoes, who's done some of our artwork. We own a gallery together now. But they came, we sat by the pool at a 5-star hotel. They'd never been to that side of town before. Just 3 hours just talking about life and passion and questions. And I gave him, microfinance one of the projects. I was like, make us a pair of sunglasses. And George, you're an amazing painter and you paint the sides of them. And, we'll see if they can sell or something. I gave him $500 to get started. And I flew home and kept in touch with them on WhatsApp. And I didn't really care. I just was like, man, I'm spending all these times with innovators at Stanford and I can't get them to do crap. And so let me just see if these guys can do what they can do. And so it didn't work out with my ex. And so I was free at Christmas time. And I remember calling Steven on WhatsApp, December 23rd. I'm like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? Like, can we come down and, I'll come hang out with you and we can hand out gifts on Christmas Eve in Metagene. He's like, are you out of your mind? You're in Washington, D.C. I'm like, I'll fly down tomorrow. And I flew down there and we handed out gifts in the community. I asked them how the sunglasses were going. They told me they failed miserably. I started laughing at them and they got really mad at me. They're like, stop laughing at us. We didn't know what we were doing. I'm like, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at me. I didn't ask you if you knew how to make sunglasses. I just assumed you knew how to make sunglasses because I thought you guys were amazing. So let me back this up. And they were literally at the verge of tears that they lost $500 and I was laughing. Like I was gonna like just be like, you idiots, like I'm done with you. And I was like, let me back this up. Like, what are you guys good at? They're like, we can make garments, we can paint. And so I was like, all right, let's do this. I'm like, let's go check out some shoes. And so we got into the shoe thing, and they make all the shoes for Nike and Converse and all this. They make Air Force One. So we bought a shoe company, gave them half, told them to take the swoosh off, gave the shoes to his artist friend Yorch, who wanted to expand his art gallery because he needed more artists to paint the shoes. So we invested in the art gallery. Then Steven's mom's been a seamstress in the Comuna for the last 20 years. So we went and visited the factory there. And so we invested in the garment factory when we started making t-shirts. So we put Yorch's art on the t-shirts that Steven's mom was making. We gave her 50% of the garment factory, first woman-owned factory in the Comuna. So I'm going to fast forward real quick. Steven and I are on a roll. We're like, this is great. And they're like micro investments, $5,000 here, $10,000 here. I don't know what the revenue stream is going to be, but I have capabilities. So I started looking into fashion and I'm in the middle of the rainforest, Jayson. So it's beautiful. Like Metagene's just gorgeous, 6 degrees north of the equator, 7,000 feet, lush green, springtime year round. And I'm looking at the shoes, and these are all plastic. These rubber soles are not rubber, it's plastic.
Oh.
And I'm seeing them, I'm like, man, we are decimating the environment. Well, being from Detroit originally, I know the automotive industry would never have taken off if there was no such thing as rubber tires. So I knew that rubber for the automotive industry came from Colombia. So I look at my 21-year-old co-founder of everything and I say, hey, do you know anyone who owns any land? Because we need to grow rubber. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I go, if we put natural
Takes
rubber
4 years.
in our shoes, right. If we put natural rubber in our shoes, we'll be doing a better job and we can charge more. And so he's like, yeah, I know people who grow. My grandmother's village that we were displaced from when I was 2, my uncles are all farmers there. I'm like, let's go see Uncle and Grandma. So the next trip, we fly on out to Uncle and Grandma's 5 hour. It's a 23-minute flight or a 5-hour drive off the grid. 2 years after a civil war where guerrillas were running around, and we go to Grandma's house and we hike up to 9,000 feet to see Uncle, who's working at an avocado farm. And I tell him my grand idea for rubber, and he's like, yeah, we can do that. It's going to take 7 years. I'm like, let's do it. Great. Awesome. And then it hits me that, hey, what are you doing here? And he's like, we're growing avocados. Now, I flew in from New York that trip, and it was $6 an avocado in New York City when I got there. And I'm looking around at all these avocado trees. I'm like, hey, let me ask you a question. Why don't you guys grow avocados? That's like a genius idea. And they're like, because we're poor. We work on this farm. And I'm like, oh, and I'm still thinking like, I had this problem of thinking peer to peer. So I'm in Colombia and I'm looking at this like I would be in California. And I'm thinking this is a $10 million spend. I'm looking at 2 full cultivated mountains of avocado trees. Oh. And so I don't even ask. I'm not going to do a private raise like, hey, guys, I'm going to be an avocado farmer. Let's go raise money, right? Like from healthcare innovation to avocado. And I just didn't want to make the same mistake that I made with the sunglasses. So I went back and I was like, listen, you guys know this stuff. Tell me what it is that you don't know rubber. I'm bringing you rubber. Like, tell me what it is that you guys can do. So tell me what this is all in. And they tell me it is all in. And we buy 75 acres and put in 5,000 avocado trees. I gave them half. They're my indigenous partners. And in 2 years from now, we will have a yield of $3.6 million US dollars a year, every year for 22 years. And Steven Alvarez, my tour guide, owns 50% of that on day one with his own. That's
the 5th craziest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Page 4 of Google.
Oh, that's crazy.
That is a wild story.
$66.4 million avocado farm in the Andes, and we're actually expanding another 100 hectares, 250 acres, as we speak. And it's just, look, it's been the revenue engine. The shoes were going to be revenue to generate more programs. This was not anything. It was, you can't go just fundraising. You're seeing it. You see COVID. If we were doing fundraising, we'd be dead in the water, right? It had to be revenue stream. It had to be sustainable. It had to be with longevity. And that was just kind of like We did this so quickly.
Why were they growing avocados if they weren't selling them? Like, I don't understand.
I'm sorry? No, they were. They were growing avocados, but they were doing it for a commercial farm. So
you got rid of the middleman
because they can't own land. They don't have any money. They make $3,000 a year.
Oh, okay.
Right? They needed that initial capital. We bought that land for 75 acres of the most fertile soil for $300,000.
Wow.
I put it down and gave them half.
Wow.
But that land is worthless without the tribal knowledge. We have it backwards. We have been dictating our plans, our will. Like if I was dealing with someone, that has done some business in Costa Rica, they would have been like, hey, let's plant palm oil. Palm oil is not what it needs to be there. Like it wouldn't grow. The altitude's not there, and it's not good for the environment. There's no way Uncle and Stephen's family is going to let me do anything that's detrimental to any portion of that land, right? So why don't I listen to their tribal knowledge and tell me what grows here? And I did, and then funded that and closed the juxtaposition of capital and resources and all of those other things. But it's all that. If you boil down to agriculture and sustainability in this planet, it's the planet and the people. Science will take care of the rest.
Yeah.
Right? Nature will take care of the rest. And so that's been such an amazing, and then to learn how the Andes and the Andean communities, they're so spread out from each other, but they're so connected. They have to take care of one another, but the entire chain collapses. And so these lessons that I learned, Jayson, in Colombia really did have an impact on me opening that door. I mean, they're all the same story.
Yeah, big time.
It's all this, we are this oneness. The only way, look, I can come in and be a colonizer and own 95 or 100% of that land and that farm and pay them wages. But I can promise you not a single tree would be planted. I gave them we built roads there. Right? We have trust. We're building a school eventually after the first harvest. I mean, those things, like I would have 2 mountains and I would be having to crack a whip or move down there to use force and fear to have them work for the man.
Yeah.
But instead, it's giving them ownership, saying this is our place, our dream. This is what we're going to do. And same on the expansion. I didn't say, thanks, and go somewhere else. We're in this together.
Wow.
I am of zero value down there. I promise you, other than being like the court jester and morale booster. But I used to think, when you're doing volunteerism or giving to charity, when you're spending time and volunteering, I used to think it was like this dignity that we're providing to the homeless. Like we care and you matter. And that's normal to think that because that's the way that we've been taught. But I'm so embarrassed because a year in, there's nothing that I didn't provide any dignity to them. All I did was validate their true belief in themselves of how amazing they are. Like I say, you guys are great. They're like, yeah, we are. I'm glad you know that. You're special. And they have no problem telling me that in a humble, yeah, of course we are. We know what we're doing. You guys got it wrong up there. And I'm like, holy shit, you guys were right. We kind of have it wrong.
Wow.